What happens when a flight attendant disrespects Karoline Leavitt for her beliefs? She never expected what came next. Karoline Leavitt settled into her luxurious first-class seat, adjusting the delicate gold cross necklace that rested just above her collarbone. The cabin hummed with the soft chatter of boarding passengers, the occasional rustle of luggage being stowed overhead. She exhaled, prepared for a peaceful flight. But peace wouldn't last long. A flight attendant approached, a stiff, almost forced smile stretched across her face. At first, Karoline thought nothing of it, maybe just a polite welcome or an offer of a drink. But something was off. The woman's eyes weren't meeting hers. They were fixed, laser-focused, on the tiny cross around her neck. "Miss, we like to keep the atmosphere welcoming for everyone," the attendant said, her voice deceptively light, yet carrying an unmistakable sharpness. Some passengers might find that a bit inappropriate. Karoline blinked. "Wait, what? Excuse me?" Her voice was calm but firm, laced with disbelief. The flight attendant's expression remained carefully composed, yet there was a subtle tightness around her mouth. "We just try to avoid displays that could make others uncomfortable." A silence settled over the nearby passengers. Some stole quick glances over the tops of their phones. Others, sensing something unusual, subtly adjusted their posture, as if anticipating a scene. Someone, Karoline could feel it, was already recording. Karoline straightened in her seat, her voice unwavering. "Are you telling me that wearing a cross is making people uncomfortable?" The smile didn't leave the flight attendant's face, but her posture shifted, just slightly, but enough. "I'm just asking for cooperation, Miss Leavitt." There it was. The deliberate use of her name. The confirmation that this wasn't some random policy enforcement, it was targeted. The attendant knew who she was. And this wasn't about maintaining peace on a flight. This was something else entirely. Karoline felt a slow, steely resolve settle in her chest. This was no longer just about her. This was a test. "So, tell me," she said clearly, making sure every passenger around her could hear. "Is religious jewelry against airline policy?" The flight attendant hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "It's not about policy, it's about what exactly?" Karoline cut in. "Because it sounds an awful lot like you're singling me out for wearing a cross." The tension in the cabin thickened. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. Others exchanged glances. Someone from business class leaned forward, whispering to their seatmate. Overhead, a soft chime sounded. Another passenger had rung for assistance. And then a voice. Firm. Certain. Unafraid. "She's right." A man 2 rows back called out. "You wouldn't say this to someone wearing a different religious symbol." That was all it took. The quiet murmurs swelled into a low, rolling wave of voices. Passengers leaned toward each other, whispering, shaking their heads. Others weren't even trying to be subtle, openly holding up their phones now, capturing the moment. The flight crew had noticed. A second attendant approached, this one with an air of authority. The lead supervisor. She stopped next to her colleague, gaze flicking from Karoline to the cross resting against her collarbone. Then, she turned to the first flight attendant. "What seems to be the issue?" Her voice was cool, neutral. Before Karoline could respond, the first attendant jumped in. "Miss Leavitt's necklace is causing discomfort for some passengers." A beat of silence. The supervisor's expression was unreadable, but something subtle changed. She took in the scene, the watching passengers, the recording phones, the charged energy hanging in the air. Then, she looked back at Karoline and made her decision. "You're welcome to wear your necklace, Miss Leavitt." The first attendant's face drained of color. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, her fingers curled tightly around the serving tray she was holding, a barely perceptible twitch in her jaw. And then, a voice from across the aisle, louder than the rest. "So you really tried to police someone's faith, in first class?" That was the moment it shifted. It wasn't just about Karoline anymore. It wasn't just about a necklace. It was about something much bigger. The murmurs intensified, swelling into full conversations. Passengers weren't just observing anymore, they were actively reacting. Some were outraged. Others shook their heads in sheer disbelief. More phones went up, more cameras recording. The supervisor exhaled, clearly aware that this situation was spiraling beyond control. Miss Leavitt, I apologize for any misunderstanding. You are free to wear your cross. But the moment was already out there. The air in the cabin had shifted. A line had been drawn. And Karoline? She wasn't just going to let this go. Too late. The damage was done. She never expected what came next. The flight attendant knew it. Oh, she knew it. Her expression flickered, a sharp, involuntary shift between frustration and panic, as if the reality of what had just happened had finally hit her. She had miscalculated, and she had miscalculated badly. Across the aisle, a man leaned forward, raising his phone just enough to make it clear. He was recording. This is unbelievable, he muttered, shaking his head. People wear religious symbols all the time. But SHE gets targeted. Karoline didn't even need to respond anymore. The passengers were speaking for her. A woman nearby scoffed. First class doesn't mean first class treatment, huh? And then another voice, sharper, more pointed. If she weren't conservative, would this even be happening? The flight crew had walked into a storm they could no longer control. The tension in the cabin had reached a breaking point. The first flight attendant had no choice but to step back, her lips pressing into a thin, rigid line. Her authority, her power in this situation gone. The lead supervisor, sensing the shift in control, turned to Karoline with a carefully measured nod. Let's get you a drink, Miss Leavitt. On the house. A weak attempt at smoothing things over. But it was too little too late. The damage was already done. Karoline didn't need their free drink. She had already won. But as she leaned back into her seat, she could feel it. The weight of 100 unseen eyes. Not just from the passengers around her, but from the cameras, the recording phones, the invisible audience that would soon be watching this unfold. And in that moment, somewhere deep in the flight attendant's mind, she must have realized the inevitable. By the time this plane landed, this wouldn't just be a heated argument at 30,000 feet. It would be a headline. The moment it all changed. As the flight continued, the air in first class remained thick with tension. Passengers exchanged glances, their whispered conversations floating through the cabin like sparks before a fire. Karoline remained composed, but she knew this wasn't just an isolated moment. This was about to explode far beyond this plane. The man who had started recording? Still at it. He subtly adjusted his phone's angle, making sure to capture everything. A woman a few rows behind? Already typing furiously on her laptop, no doubt putting together a post that would hit social media before they even landed. There was no stopping this now. The flight attendant who had confronted Karoline tried to act as if nothing had happened, but the truth was written all over her face. She moved differently now. Stiff, careful, avoiding eye contact. The once confident authority she carried? Gone. She had been reduced to cautious, measured steps, as if she were waiting to see just how bad this was about to get. And then, it happened. A chime rang through the cabin, signaling the airline's in-flight Wi-Fi connection had just gone live. A beat later, Karoline's phone buzzed. Then again. And again. Somewhere, somehow, the story had already hit the internet. She tapped her screen. The first video clip, less than a minute long, was already circulating on a major conservative news page. The caption? Blunt. Direct. Unapologetic. Christian woman harassed mid-flight over her faith. You won't believe what happened next. The comments? They were flooding in. This is what we're up against, folks. They won't even let us exist in peace. Unreal. I hope this flight attendant gets what's coming to her. Karoline, you're a warrior. Stand strong. The momentum was unstoppable. Karoline lifted her gaze, glancing toward the first flight attendant. She knew. The woman was now standing near the galley, whispering in hushed, frantic tones with the supervisor. Her body language? Stiff. Uncertain. Uneasy. She knew her actions had just ignited something she couldn't control. Because by the time this flight landed, this wouldn't just be a viral moment. It would be a movement, the aftermath, and the beginning of something bigger. With every passing minute, the weight of the moment settled in deeper. Karoline wasn't just fighting for herself. This was about every single person who had ever been silenced, mocked, or singled out for their beliefs. And now, the world was watching. The flight attendant, now visibly shaken, wouldn't even look in Karoline's direction anymore. The airline supervisor, standing a few feet away, was typing rapidly on a company-issued tablet. Probably an internal report. Probably some last-ditch effort at damage control. But it was too late. By the time the plane touched down, Karoline's phone was buzzing nonstop. More news outlets had picked up the story. More people were demanding answers. More voices were rising in support. As she stepped off the plane, a man in the terminal, a complete stranger, caught her eye. He gave her a small, knowing nod of respect. A moment later, a fellow passenger from her flight leaned in and whispered, "We're with you." She smiled. Because this wasn't just about what had happened in the air. This was about standing up everywhere. And for those who had tried to silence her, they had just made her voice louder than ever. What do you think? Should faith be treated with respect, no matter where you are? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that the mainstream media doesn't want you to see.